When it comes to styling a list, we of course can style both the list items and also the list itself. So let's start with the items. And here I'll actually cut that markup here, so to say, so that JSX code for item, and I'll add a new function outside of the component function because we don't really need anything from inside the component. And I'll just name this render list item. The name is up to you. It's a function, and this function in the end should return some JSX code here. So it should return this JSX code here. And to work correctly, it of course needs to get, let's say, our value which we want to output. So here I'll then use value as a key and output value here between the text tags. And now we can use render list item down there where we call map. And here, well, there I simply want to execute render list item for every item we're mapping, and I forward guess to that as a value in a render list item. Now if we do that, we should see the same result as before. So nothing too fancy here. But now we have a leaner markup down there, leaner JSX code down there, and have our list item JSX code here. Now we can style this, and of course I want to style my view here. For this I'll add a style here from the style sheet, which I'll name list. And in there I actually now want to have two text items, and one should be the number of the round and the second should be the value. So here I need an additional argument. I need the value, but also the number of the round, or num of round as I name it here. And I want to output this dynamically here, maybe with this hash symbol in front of it, just for stylistic reasons. So now we have these two texts in this list here. And there I actually don't want to use the text, but the body text, so that I have my default text styling. So for that, let's import body text from components body text and use body text instead of the normal text here in our list item. With that, we're using the right font. And now let's add that list object to our style sheet so that we can style the list item. Actually, this should be called list item therefore, and not list. So let's add list item to the style sheet now, like this. And now, of course, you can style this in whatever way you want. I will style it in a relatively easy way here. Just give it a border color of, let's say, black, or maybe this slight grayish color here. A padding in all directions of, let's say, 15 to have some spacing. A margin on the vertical axis of 10 so that we have some spacing between the list items and they don't sit right next to each other. A background color of white maybe, and of course you can use different colors here if you want to. Now that's a start. Now when we're setting a border color, we also need to set a border width here though, otherwise we won't see a border, and I'll set this to 1. And very important, I want to have these two text components in my view sit next to each other and not above of each other, which would be the default because a view uses flexbox and uses a default flex direction of column. To have the items sit next to each other on a horizontal axis, we add flex direction row here, just like this. And with that, if we save this and the app rebuilds, let's give it a try and see how that looks like. Yeah, that looks okay-ish, but there still is room for improvement. For example, I want to set a width on that list item to make sure that it's not just as wide as its content needs it to be, but as wide as, as we tell it. Now to add a width, you can add width here to list item. But if we do that and set this to, let's say, 80%, you'll actually see that this behaves not in the way you want it to behave, right? So this does not look right. So now the content is somehow moved, but the item itself is certainly not wider. To style a list properly, the best way is to simply wrap it into a view and then style this view. So here we can add a view, give it a style of, let's say, list. So here I'm referring to styles list, and add this list object to our style sheet now, like this. And on this list, we can now set a width of 80% and get rid of the width here on the list item. If we do this with this wrapping view, you now see the list items have the correct look. And that's just something to be aware of. If you want to control the height or the width of your list, of your scroll view, then don't add the style to the list items. Also, don't add it necessarily directly to the scroll view. because of how this works internally, but instead simply wrap a view around the scroll view where you set that desired width and height. Now what you'll notice is that on the list item it would be nice if we had the round number being output there and then had some spacing between the round number and our actual guess. And to achieve this, for one, we need to set a style here on list item. We can set justify content, which controls how the content of this view is laid out along the main axis, which for flex direction is the horizontal axis. And there I'll use space around to distribute the available free space around our text items here. And now to also output the number of the round, which we expect as an argument here in render list item, we can go down to our map function, and there we actually do get a second argument in this function which map calls automatically, and that's the index of the item we're outputting. So we could forward that index here to render list item, or index +1 since it will start at 0 and we probably want to print 1 for the first round instead of 0. Now with that out of the way, if we add this, now this looks a bit better, and maybe we actually switch this look here from space around to space between. I think that looks nicer. But before I save this and update this, you will also notice that one issue you have with that is that the round number is not actually correct. The first round is the bottommost round because we add new rounds at the beginning of the list. Therefore, the index is not the right measure for the round number because the index is always, well, 0, or if we add 1, it's 1 for the first list item, but the first list item is actually not our first round. Instead, since we add new rounds as the first list item is our latest round and certainly not the first one. So to fix that, what we can do is here in render list items, instead of using the index, we can of course use our past guesses list here and get the length of that list and then deduct the index from that. And that gives us actually the correct round number for a given list item. So now if we do that and we restart this, now we see round number 1 is the guess 7, and that stays number 1 if we add another guess. And now this seems to work correctly here. You will also see that as soon as we exceed our boundaries here, of course we can scroll the list, and that also seems to work just the way it should. Let's also give this a try on Android here. We're starting a new game there. And let's hope we don't win too early. Yeah, that seems to work, but there I actually can't scroll. So on Android, this is actually not working correctly. This list is not scrollable there. So what's wrong on Android? Now, whilst it does scroll fine on iOS, for the scroll view nested in a view to scroll fine on Android as well, make sure that the surrounding view actually uses Flex 1. So add this to the list style here, which is the style applied to the view, which is wrapped around the scroll view. With that added, if we now try this again on Android, you'll now notice that now this is scrollable as soon as you exceed the boundaries of the screen. And on iOS, it should still work as before. And that being iOS, we can even scroll without it exceeding the boundaries. That's just a default iOS behavior that you can bounce such lists a bit. So now we have the scrollable list here with scroll view and map, and it works on both Android and iOS.